All right. So, yeah. Oh, this is my stream stuff. Anyway, I am back. Um, Let me just turn it off for a sec. Anyway, um, yeah, been trying to stream more, but last time I did a stream was like a couple weeks ago, and I think I was working on a template for like a wider idea that I was having. Basically, a monorepo template that can work with multiple languages. And I was testing an idea of having a CLI tool to operate all the commands together under like a unified API almost, I guess, or command unified commands, basically same commands for all the package for all the different language workspaces. And I think they're called projects, and Luna is the tool that I'm using for monorepo management. And I'm not going to go into the details, but that project is out, and I sort of like stopped working on it a little bit once I proved the concept. And as I was working on it, I realized that yes, I can continue working on it and building it up, as I've done many other monorepo projects or templates before that. Um, but I decided to stop and focus on a wider idea, something that will help me manage my business more. And this is more of like an idea that sort of contains multiple monorepo workspaces into like a single, I don't want to call it a workspace. The term that I came up with is workstreams. And I didn't come up with the term. I mean, I came up with it as I was thinking about it, but then doing some research, I realized there's already that out there. The reason I came up with workstream is because it matches workflows. For me personally, as a solo developer that's running his own company and then working on other projects with like a partner that's also has his own company. Um, so like I have stuff going on everywhere, and I have different types of workflows depending on what I'm doing. Like specifically for my personal use case, which is a solo founder, right, or a solo startup operator. Um, my workflows are many, like they're not just development, they're marketing, management, where I manage myself and other people, other workers that I outsource to. Um, then there's also like the higher level stuff where I like managing my own business, doing my finances, making sure that my business docs are up to date. I'm keeping track of my books, all of that. So like these are all separate workflows from engineering. There's also not kind of design and all that, right? But they all kind of like work within the same, I guess, collection. And so ultimately, what I decided was to kind of like express that into a file system, a local file system, so I can manage this workflows better with like I don't say fleet of AI agents, but more like multiple AI agent sessions. Because naturally that is my workflow. I use several models and several different tools for this. Um, so I wanted to like contain all that and express all that in like a local environment that different agents can read and write to, and basically share context locally, so I don't have to express the same things and carry over thoughts, and then have like losses of translations or any kind of drifts that happen between these different sessions and different models and different agents and different platforms you're using. Um, Another reason for doing that is I want my developer environment to be the same depending on where I'm working on. So like I would, like if I have my main machine, and then I have like a separate machine or a server that like is connected to the network. I want them to be able to reproduce or share the same environment locally, though. This isn't specifically like you're interfacing with like a box, or like you're not SSHing or like connecting to like or entering like a mainframe or something. It's more of like it's more distributed. So you have like a copy of the same environment and the same stream, the same like workflows propagate between each of these different machines separately, and through like sort of like a series of gateways or controls. So you're not actually exposing any information or data that you don't want to the other person. And a good example of that, I guess it would be a designer and a developer working together is probably like the most common one I can think of. And basically, you don't want the designer to worry about installing the app or doing anything. You kind of want to, unless they want to, they can, but most of the time, like you don't want to know like your developer configs or anything like that, like environment secrets and all that, like API keys. You want to keep that stuff private inside a vault or something, right? Ideally, you want to back that up somewhere safe that's offline that you can access, or maybe like some kind of trusted server that you trust that only you know how to access. So basically, the designer will only see like the dev environment or the stage environment, most likely the stage, if they're like a true designer that doesn't mess with code. They just want to think about design only, and vice versa. Like for design, like the developer doesn't need to know like what your workflows, like local workflows are. They just want to see like the version that you're going to share with them and get feedback on from them, so you can iterate on that, right? And another reason you don't want them sharing files, right, is because easily your storage capacity will exceed its limits. Your RAM will exceed the limit. Like there's resource limits that you got to think about, especially these days when everything's so expensive, right? And another core reason is token costs. Like if you're sharing all this information, like you're sharing a repo with an agent, or you're sharing all this code with an agent every time you're doing work, you're burning through your tokens, right? So you want to keep track of your sessions and your state, your workflow states. So as you're like working through these for the code or the specs or the documents, whatever you want to call them, there's like continuity there. So you're not like oversharing too much information where like the agent has to analyze and scan everything, and because they don't need to, the agent is like clever or smart enough to figure out the gist of what it is it needs to do, especially if you break down the project specifically to be that way. Whereas like, or not the project, but your workflow. I'm thinking about technical terms in terms of Luna, and but let's not get into that. I usually like to digress a lot when I talk, because I'm not used to streaming. But anyway, let's let me stay on topic here. So you don't want to like share the entire repo with the agent every time you ask them to do one minor thing, especially if you're like working in a specific set of files, or if you're carrying over work from another session or another phase of the project or the workflow. So this is sort of like a way for me to control that and build like a system around it. So like the namespace I landed on was workflows operating system, WFOS, which I have a public repo out on that. It's a Luna monorepo, and that actually lives within that wider model that it's trying to basically I don't want to say control, but more like assist. And I split it up into like 4 packages right now, and then there might be more later. and some apps that'll help with all of that, plus tools and configs that will help you, like, you know, align or all your agents, and not just agents, but also like employees or different people that are working in the same things together. Although as a solo developer, I am working on all this solo. As I mentioned, I do sometimes ask for help or get help. So this would be like a way for me to contain all of that context of all those different workflows into like a single system that I can operate on, and not worry about, you know, context loss and wasting too many tokens. And to prove the idea, I'm trying to use as many open source libraries and tools as I can, so I don't have to write too much code. And I am basically doing this all, not all of it, but most of it with Rust and like shell scripts for now to prove the idea. The reason I chose Rust, I tried Zig and I liked it. Not Zig. Is it Zig? I think it's Zig. Yeah, I tried Zig. I liked it for games and stuff, building games. I tried it out a little bit. But then Rust, I think it has like a lot more resources and tools out there, specifically agentic tools. So like, I'm familiar with C, and C is pretty hard because if you don't know computer science, right? Like, which I mean I do, but not from like an educational or scholarly or like a level. I'm more of like I would say like an intermediate level where I just, you know, fiddle around with the code a little bit and like read some stuff, but not at all like a low level systems language person. And then like Rust, I think makes it a lot easier to get into it. And yeah, I probably will get a lot of shit about this, but I'm like it is kind of like, I don't say it's easy because it's very difficult to like actually work with it on like a very low level, but on a like an agentic or prototype level, which I am mainly focusing on for this POC, is it's been pretty nice. Like, and you can write a lot of sweet tests with it, and you know, like try things around, and kind of like as you're reading it, you can understand what everything's doing. And I like the concept of Rust of starting out with like one file and then expanding on that, and so that's right up my alley. Although I do like to sometimes, you know, create too many files, I think, but over time I learned how to control that impulse and kind of like, you know, just create the most necessary files, which are like a pattern of namespaces within a folder that kind of like can repeat within for all the modules. That's kind of like the pattern that I chose here, and it's been working out pretty well. So like if you're like looking at a module, you kind of see like, oh, this file is the entry point, this file is like the you know, like the tasks, all of that. And I'll get into that a little bit more into the code, but really I just wanted to talk about the idea more, like the high level idea, and like how I'm trying to prove it, and for how I plan to use it for like future work. And that starts with like defining my workflows and seeing patterns in it, right? And then trying to automate those workflows a little bit better, so I don't have to waste time throughout the day just you know, doing the same things over and over, where I can just, you know, have a hotkey for it, or like have a function that an agent can run for me, or I can run as a developer through the terminal, and you know, do a lot of this repeatable stuff instead of like you know, writing a bunch of like opening a bunch of windows or writing a bunch of commands from like different tools and stuff, right? To like start up your environment, all of that. So ideally, I want to like narrow this down or abstract all that through like through an interface or like a tool. I decided to go like terminal first, because um, an agent and a developer can easily um, adapt those patterns within their own workflows. And, you know, I don't have to worry about UI or anything like that. Although I will get to that as well, because I plan to eventually have a mix of Unix and a local applications to do like higher level stuff through like interfacing with a local network, which interfaces with virtual environments for like testing and stuff like that, opening files, doing stuff securely, and also like talking with servers and cloud platforms and stuff like that. Like for example, an orchestrator that can run browser tools to talk to various web-based platforms. Ideally, they'll have like desktop tools, which a lot of these big companies are kind of like moving towards. And with, I wouldn't say, I mean, JavaScript, TypeScript is still there, but I wouldn't say it's and browser stuff is pretty good. But it's not the only option that we have here. And I think like a lot of that kind of like slows us down and creates bottlenecks, specifically with all these web platforms and services like that are on the web that are kind of like competing with each other and doing the same thing. So you kind of like end up with like multiple subscriptions that do similar things, and you have to like go back and forth between these tools, and like it's just man, it's just it slows you down and stops you from thinking about the actual problems that you want to solve and you have to solve. And it's kind of like what I want to abstract away, like basically aggregation of all of these platform services tools into like a single interface that you can like replicate in virtual environments and kind of like propagate and clone, and all of them almost like work independently, and also be able to connect and communicate with each other in a safe way with like a lot of like gates and checks, security checks, and all of that, and human in the loop kind of like intervals. So, or conditions rather, not intervals. Although intervals are important when you're looping a lot of this stuff. So it's not really like as basic as a loop, although it is essentially there's like a series of loops involved, which has already been solved by a lot of these platforms. Like if you look at ChatGPT's work tab, I don't know what they call it. I guess the work thing. They added recently. Then you have Claude Code, and then you have like Claude Work, right, or whatever. Then you have like things like OpenClaw, although that's kind of like deprecated since basically ChatGPT work is OpenClaw on the back end. That's what I think. It's like integrating in their system and kind of like a better way of doing it. Although OpenClaw is open source, so that's kind of like still competing with it. And then you have Hermes Agent, the most recent one. Then you have like all these other tools like Conductor and all the other variants of that. Like how do you keep up with those? Well, the idea is to aggregate them into like a single workflow tool or system. So that's what I'm getting at, is like I heard the term factories recently, software factories, in the sense that this is kind of like that, but it's like, imagine it's like the next level of that, which is like a system of factories. So if you look at it from like a physical perspective, if loops are like communities or cities, right? Or like, I don't know, like a highway system, right? Well, not even a system, but yeah, kind of like that. And then but then you go beyond that, like, oh, what are these doing? Like, oh, there's like these warehouses or factories, and then there's like these cities, right, that are like kind of like working together or competing against each other, right? So like you scale that up, like all these nations or states, right? Um, Doing that on on a more massive scale. Um, so that's a bad example, but you get what I'm getting at. It's like it's like yes, you have all of these things, right? They're working together, they're competing, they're like kind of like building the same things over and over. And this has been a problem in software development for a long time, especially modern software development. It wasn't as bad in like in the 80s or 70s. But now it's like more like chasing. Um, I don't want to say chasing the money, but also, but kind of is. It's like you're chasing the funding, you're chasing the cloud, you're chasing the recognition, and you're not really concerned about actually solving problems anymore. You're more of like concerned about getting to market first and competing with other people or one-upping them, taking your idea higher, or using those ideas to build your own ideas. And that's fine. That's great actually, because that's how you get like new ideas to generate and be created. But long term, you are kind of burning through resources. You are kind of wasting time, and time is pretty limited. And what I'm trying to get at is there needs to be some kind of system that develops over time where those kind of things are not discarded or discouraged. They're more of like contained in like a almost like a higher level layer level that will give you tools to kind of like make use of all those things as components or packages or libraries, and basically apply all of those, all the power of all those tools together into like a wider system, almost like a net internet internet of all things kind of like, if you can say it like that, but not really. It's more of like you're applying that knowledge and skills and expertise and capability to like solve higher level problems that um, can't really be solved with today's tools because um, simply because the concern or the focus isn't really there. It's all kind of like um, split up, and people are like doing their own thing and kind of like competing with each other without really, like coming together and working on stuff. And as far as how feasible this idea is, I don't know yet. I'm trying to prove it with my own business locally, and this is a problem that I've been having for a long time now as like as a developer and someone that like tried product development or has been doing product development through various startups and working for different companies. I quickly realized that a lot of the same problems are there no matter where you go, and that is architecture is just not important. Like building good systems or building good tools or reusable partials or components, that's not a priority. Although, or yes, that has been a concern more recently, but all that really created is competing design systems. So wait, let me see what's going on with my webcam. See, like I don't think I got too many resources to stream, so I've been trying to build a separate machine for like working and streaming, and I have like my old PC. I might convert that to like a streaming machine. But that's another story. That's kind of like on the bottom of my list right now. Once I get this, hopefully once I get this idea proven and working, I can kind of like, start focusing on that more. Because branding and marketing is a big problem for me specifically. I don't have much outreach. Let me go ahead and delete this webcam and try a new one. Mac OS. Video capture. What do you do here? Video capture. There you go. Maybe this won't work. Yeah. this will work. Well, I guess I can try this old camera. As much as I don't want to, I will. I also don't know when my microphone is still recording or not. Yeah. Don't really like doing this on the fly like this, but whatever, who cares? You know, it's whatever. Let me get back on track here. So backup camera here. The problem with my camera now is like I have the pocket cam, and then it just, I guess it eats up resources, or for some reason it just turns off. It's kind of annoying. Anyway, back on topic, back on track. I think the last thing I said was I have problems with marketing, branding. Not really branding. I'm okay with branding. I've been doing like design and illustrations and stuff pretty heavily on the side over the years, although I haven't really like fully committed to it as a career. My commitment was to software development for about close to 2 decades now, and but branding has always been like a big passion of mine. Marketing, not so much. I left that to others, but now I'm trying to get back into it, because without marketing, like, you might as well just be, you know, shooting stuff in the dark, and you might have the greatest idea in the world, but if nobody knows about it or hears from it, like, the best thing that could happen is, I don't know, maybe you'll find a few people, like, organically, but not really, you know. So like, it was one of my biggest regrets is not operating some kind of, or committing to some kind of like social media presence. Although, not to say that I don't dabble with social media, but a lot of that was like wasted time, just for fun. What I should have been doing is, you know, promoting my brand and gaining followers and gaining exposure. But then again, that's just not who I am. You know, it's always been like a weakness of mine, which is like, even when I was just drawing as well, or like getting like before dev, I was into like drawing and writing and creative stuff like that. Never really had much exposure because I never really like to talk to people, which is a shame, because, you know, you learn a lot from people. You also waste a lot of time with people depending who you're talking to, and so there's always that fine balance, right? But if anyone's like trying to get out there and get their name out there, I would say try to break that habit early of, you know, mine specifically is, I don't want to, it's like I overthink stuff, or I overplan stuff, or I kind of like, it's like a form of procrastination where you're like, oh, I got to do this first before I actually start getting out there and sharing my ideas and trying to get people to notice me. That has never been like a big strength of mine, and I like to think I can talk about my ideas, or share my ideas and thoughts pretty clearly and coherently in a matter of speaking, depending on what I'm talking about. But I always just, you know, take the back seat and, you know, wait for an opportunity to come before I do that. I'm not like proactive enough where I like, you know, jump head first into like into a group of people and start like, you know, social engineering the entire flow of the conversation. I'm more of like, you know, like listening more. I think which is a good trait too, because it gives you time to think about things. But again, you can't take things to extremes, and you can't get too comfortable with that either. You also have to, you know, like in a way, like enforce your will at times, or you know, interject, or I don't want to say argue, but you know, because that's a bad word. More of like you know, like offer a different perspective, because that's important too. And you got to learn how to do that in a manner where it's, you know, like you're not triggering too many social faux pas, or hurting people's feelings, or you know, like making yourself look like the bad guy in a lot of things. And maybe I have that problem as well, where some people might think, oh, this guy's just an asshole, or you know, this guy's just you know, like too full of himself, or he thinks everyone's beneath him, so he don't interact with us. And there, like when I was younger, there were times when maybe I thought like that, but not really. Like these days, more of like, you know, I try to get out there sometimes, but like a lot of social situations that I do find myself in, I don't really connect with people because they're not interested in the same things, or they're kind of like, you know, the setting also matters, right? So like I'm not gonna go into like a social event that's completely unrelated to what I'm talking about or what I'm working on, and you know, start talking about my big ideas. That just seems ridiculous, right? People look at you like you're crazy. And I did that a lot sometimes when I was in those settings, like and people really didn't like that. So like all those social faux pas and stuff, you gotta learn early, if you want to, you know, be a entrepreneur, or like somebody that's trying to operate or promote their business. So yeah, that's very important. I think it's like as important, if not more important, than actually building out or working on your idea. And as an idea guy, as somebody that loves building and, you know, planning and thinking about stuff on like a deeper level, and solving problems that are hard to solve, or offering solutions, I think it's very important that you can operate in a social environment, not just like a isolated kind of like developer environment, I would say, or like a creative environment. And as like an artist by background, as somebody that, you know, reads a lot, studies a lot, somebody that likes being in their head a lot, that's something that I struggle with, and something that I'm not very good at, and I will admit that. But you know, it's never too late to learn and start doing that. You know, like especially when you get older, you get more confident. You really stop caring about what other people think. When I was younger, I had like a big problem about that. I had like some insecurities, and that's mainly because of you know, how things, how I approach social situations. People kind of like got turned off, and you know, called me weird or whatever, or thought I was weird. And which is okay. You know, it's okay to be like that. You'll always find people that you can connect with, and I did. I found a lot of very good people, close friends that, you know, didn't really care about that. But I'm talking about like in general, you want to be kind of like accessible, and a wider range of people. I think my mic died, but I'll be able to record, I believe. We'll see when this video finishes. I don't really have many viewers. The reason I'm streaming is to, you know, maybe I'll edit some of these videos later, and snippets and stuff, and then it's more like practice to, you know, get content out there. But yeah, going back to the idea of sharing information, I think that's very important. So you kind of see like all of my chat stuff. I don't want to like share that. I do want to show you maybe like this folder, just to explain my workflow a little bit, going back way back to the beginning of talking about the workflows operating system idea, and actually like unifying my workflow to like something more automated. And ideas I had here. Well, here let me rewind that a little bit and give you like the background. So here's the thing. When you're working on software, when you're working on a project or developing something, yes, you can use a lot of skills and reuse a lot of skills and prompts to like, you know, get something, or tools to get like something like decent enough to be a prototype that you can pitch with. But at the end of the day, you're not gonna make a successful product out of that. You may get funding at some point, but all that'll lead to is eventually you having to hire developers, which is fine because you're creating jobs, right? But if you want to maximize your profits as a solo developer, you kind of want to handle most of the work yourself. And with AI and agents, right, you kind of can get there, especially if you have experience building software in the past, or if you have the knowledge and skills to like think about how to translate or transform your thoughts and ideas down into like actual docs and specs, and following like a proper format that an agent will be able to understand and analyze and produce better results, right? So that's kind of like where we are at right now in this current state, in this current model, which is like, yes, you're using all these tools like Claude Code, great example, or ChatGPT or Cursor or whatever, Factory, right? Even Conductor or you know, Hermes, right? Hermes agent. So all of those things, like open code, all of that, right? So all these tools, yes, there's like I used a lot of these, like a lot of these tools over the short few years that have been out. I've tried all of them, mostly all of them, not all of them, but like I would say like 90% of them. And what it really comes down to is low level, like what are you inputting into your prompt when you're initiating an agent session, right? When you initiate your sessions, you eventually come to a conclusion where there is a repeatable workflow there, right? So like eventually you come up with like templates or some kind of skills, right? Or some kind of like, let's say, keep it simple, like prompt template. You have like a specific prompt template when you want to, you know, work on an idea or develop an idea or prove a concept. So you would kind of like do the same things. You would probably like look at your previous sessions, the ones that worked the best, and you kind of like try to replicate them. And that would probably mean like you're copying these prompts and you're just like replacing some variables in them, right? So eventually that leads you to like a template that you can kind of like reuse over and over when you're prompting an agent and asking him to do stuff. And that probably like conclusively, I don't want to say conclusively, but like most likely it'll be like, hey, split up the work, right? Create phases in a project. Give me like different PRs for all the different tasks and subtasks, right? So like if you have too many subtasks in a task, you would probably want that to be a single PR. So like it depends how deep you want to get with it, especially if you're like reading the code or checking the code, but also trying to like confirm it or verify it or test it, right? Against other agents or other developers or whatever, other environments. So like at some point you probably reach a conclusion, especially, and this is really for people that have experience with development. You reach a conclusion where like you are documenting, or you're writing more, you're spending more time writing down what it is you want the agent to build than actually than the time it takes for the agent to build it, right? And you're also spending more time reviewing that and iterating over that output until you get the result that you actually want. And that normally would probably take you like, I don't know, maybe if you're really good at it, like 1 or 2 sessions. At some points, depending on how complex the idea is, it could take you like, I don't know, like several sessions, or you might not even get there, or you might prove parts of it. But if you're not inputting it properly, if you're not resetting your sessions, or you're not like logging your sessions so you can carry that work over to a new session, you might even like have regressions, or the agent might overwrite your work based on like how confused they are. And this is more of a problem of like earlier days when the tools weren't as developed. But now it's not really that much of a problem with the newer tools because the agents themselves have their own internal memory and tools and processes to help them manage these tasks and organize them and carry sessions over to the next one and kind of like test things and all of that, right, to get you the actual result that you want. So under the hood, I think the models themselves learn from, you know, they learn from new information and new patterns and stuff like that, but they also have like their own internal processes and systems for, you know, doing things better. So like in a way, the models are getting better and then more advanced, but they're also costing more. And I think that's because the tools themselves and the processes themselves are wasting resources to give you the output that you want. And individuals that use those tools are also wasting resources trying to get the output they want. So they can burn through tokens based on like what they're doing. So like if they have like, if they're writing detailed documents that are like, I don't know, like 500,000 lines long, or they have like several documents that they always share or always have, always include in their prompts or in their processes, and like combined with all these tools and skills that they use to like get the output they want, like they're actually burning through their resources and their tokens a lot faster. So that's a real problem, right? Especially with like these newer models that are like very expensive, and they're only getting more expensive as the costs go up and the demand for data centers as a solution comes up, or there's these various other solutions that are kind of like, oh, we like hardware companies like NVIDIA building workstations that are like allow users to, you know, have their own local workstations to like so they don't have to rely on all these cloud platforms or solutions that are out there, like open, like not open claw, but not open code, but Claude or open AI or whatever, right? Or Grok. So like you're seeing these in a way you're seeing them compete for those for those for the people that are spending that money, and a lot of them are like big companies. They're spending millions to billions of dollars. If you like read recent reports or news, and you know, as I said before, resources is limited, time is limited. So realistically speaking, that's not sustainable. So there has to be like more efficient ways of doing this, and there have been tools and skills that help with that, like resource um, token resource management tools, like RTK is a big example, which I have integrated into workflow OS, but also like MDQ, which is like markdown query tools. So like you're querying a bunch of markdown files before, so like you're running the tool to like read or analyze a bunch of markdown documents, and then you compile a report on that research, and then you're using the report in your prompt. So when you send it to like a high tier model, you are not burning through tokens and having that model read all these massive documents and specs and skills. You're kind of like giving it the short version of it. So your token input is a much lower, and your token output, for token output, there's tools like, hey, Ponytail is the one I use, but there's probably others. So like you're like you're creating hooks and skills and a combination of functions and resources to like help the agent produce code that is like more minimal and not so, and like they're responsive and not as verbose, they're more direct, so you're not actually burning those tokens either. And that does help with minimizing costs, and that has helped me in a lot of ways to like push in a little bit more with my workflows, dealing with a lot of these agents. But still I'm burning through tokens a lot faster. So like I probably burned through like I have I have the cheaper plans. I try not to overspend. So like I'm using the $20 cursor plan, the original one, like the old school one. Like I haven't upgraded that at all. And then there's also like I have a $20 Chat GPT subscription, and I have a $20 Factory Droid subscription. I have used like pay as you go API token costs through like um, Claude. So like I have a Claude account, but it's a free account, and I would just create API keys. And whenever I need to use a latest Claude model for like some kind of um, complex task, I would use like something like Zed or Open Code or Open Router, depending on what I'm doing, right? To use those API tokens, which cost a lot. Like I think the most I spent was playing around with OpenClaw when the hype was there. I was kind of like interested in seeing what it was capable of, and more on that later at some point. But you know, I ended up burning through like maybe like $200 worth of tokens through Open Router and Claude. I use those concurrently in a matter of like 2 weeks, and that would be like my annual expenses for like the Cursor or OpenAI $20 plan. So like I'll pay for the full year, so I don't spend as much. Um, and now Droid, Factory Droid is pretty good, but you burn through those tokens a lot faster. So you're limited to what you can do, and I can show you that in a sec. So like I got a session for Droid right here. Yeah, that's my old camera. And yeah, so see, like I reach my limit, and then what happens when I do that? I have to wait 5 hours for the day, or if I burn through the week within like let's say 2 days, I have to wait, like 4 or 3 days, depending on how many days I have left. So that's a real bummer. But it also, like you balance that delay out with planning, management, organizing. So that's kind of like where this idea kind of came from. Like you have to have a system in place so you can automate a lot of these workflows, run a lot of these loops, and run a lot of these like scheduled tasks, cron jobs, and reviews and all of this. So there's like a multitude of things that are kind of like working together. So the idea is you don't want to be sitting at your desk all day, like having all these routines over and over, which are kind of like repeatable as you go along. You kind of develop all these patterns, right? Even if like your daily patterns of like using a computer, you always have stuff that you do as like almost like a ritual or a routine. So all of those things you want to express through almost like a system of patterns that developers or agents or workers, I would just call them workers. Let's classify all those as workers into like that they can use tools to kind of like automate a lot of that stuff away, so you don't have to worry about it, right? You don't have to think about it at all. You kind of just like abstract it away into like a simple command or function or a series of simple commands that you can just run as a set or like as a series of sets throughout the day, to just free up a lot of your time and free up your memory space so you can focus on solving even bigger problems, which this kind of system, if it's proven, applies to as well, which I hope to show you at some point. But right now I'm just kind of like talking and working through this idea in my mind a little bit more, because I think I spent like at least, I like to say like close to a month really writing this down and putting this on paper. But I would say it's like the culmination of a lot of concepts and ideas that I've been floating around in my head for, I would say, like 10 to 20 years now. And this has always been like a passion of mine to like universality in software, which has always been like a kind of like a pipe dream in a way, because of all the different languages and tools and libraries are kind of like coming out and competing against each other, and then like you have all these different um, camps or cliques or sects forming, where like, hey, this way is better or this way is better. Like PHP sucks, JavaScript's the best, or JavaScript sucks. You got to use Python or whatever, right? Like all of that is pretty common. But at the end of the day, it's more about like what can you do, and what can you do that solves a problem. And a good example is Electron, right? Like with JavaScript, like building native apps with JavaScript. So like you're taking all the tools and resources that have modernized web development using JavaScript and like React and all those things, right? Let's say, which is pretty like hyped up a couple of like cycles ago. But if you look at it now, you're like, well, wow, why would they write an entire like why would they write these Electron apps? Because they're consuming so many resources. Like your computer can't really handle it. So like, yes, you have more powerful computers. You can build like stronger systems, but do you really need to? You know what I mean? Like, what if you can put those resources to better use? What if you have like more low level software tools that don't require those many resources, that are much faster, and they can speed up your operations and your build times, and you don't need that much RAM to like run software anymore, right? You can use that RAM for something else, or you don't need this much GPU to run this app. You can use that, you can allocate that elsewhere, right? Or now, like with the cost so high, like people are saying, for example, Docker, right? Docker eats up so many resources, holy shit. And like if you're running Docker locally to like replicate an environment that a server has, so like you're paying higher server costs, but you also need a powerful machine with a lot of RAM to develop that product using Docker. So like your server and your local machines of all your developers within that network are like in sync, right? And then you have like all these pipelines that take hours to complete and all that. And like a lot of these modern tools, specifically built with Rust these days, do speed up a lot of that, which is great. But what about applying that to LLMs or models, or all these agent platforms that kind of like are still using all those tools through like a proxy almost, or like a virtual environment, right? So like all of that adds up and still kind of like impacts how many resources you're spending, and how much you can actually do realistically with limited resources. So you'll probably always going to need like newer machines and newer specs, or higher tier models. So like it's kind of like a never ending cycle. So like as the tools and the platforms and the models and everything get better, they're also spending more resources, and that means a lot of people have to keep up. And at some point, a lot of people are going to get priced out. So like only the people that can afford them can keep up and keep using those higher tier models. And then you also run into the problem of disruption from open source, like China, for example, recently with the Kimi model that open sourced that, right? I think it was Kimi and K3, I think. So like they open sourced that model, which is like on the same tier as at the time one of the most recent US models that are like charging a lot more money for the tokens than this now open source model from China. And a lot of people have a problem with that because it disrupts the market. It also disrupts the environment a little bit, because it makes you wonder, it makes you question things like, hey, why are these models so expensive? Why can't we do that? And then it always comes back to like, oh, we need more data centers. We need to spend more money. We need to print all this money now to build all these data centers. But then the energy grid and like all our actual physical systems that make this country operate are not built for that. They're not even like planned for that, right? So you can't, obviously you can't, like that's a huge disruptor, not only in the software space, but also in like the physical space now, where like you have a lot of conflict. People are actually, you know, like ready to go to war against that, and that's not always that's not a good thing to have at the back of your mind. So um, how do you deal with that? So that's kind of like where I'm trying to lead this whole idea towards, is like what I think is that the solutions are there, like low level tools are there for us to use, like Rust being a big example. So like you just got to apply those um, Unix level, or like even beyond Unix and Rust, which are like low level system tools, right? Um, Now there's like things like WebAssembly and like um, layers that are like a little bit like even a lower level beneath Unix, which is like translating to machine code, which I think LLM models and AI agents are capable of much better than humans in handling. So like in a way, you're kind of like abstracting the um, not only your understanding of those tools, but because you're at a higher level, you are still understanding how those work, I hope, but you don't have to spend as much time learning them and using them on a low level. You're kind of like abstracting that away on like a higher level. So in a way, you're creating almost like a system or a language or like a process for unifying, you know, low level system tools and processes and frameworks into a higher level that you can remember easily, into like and you make it into like a series of commands that you can just run, you know, and you know what those commands do on a higher level as an architect. So in a way, you're kind of like becoming a systems architect that can also build fit systems, or at least orchestrate or direct um, people or agents, or a combination of both. Let's just call them workers. Like I said that before. Let's say you can direct workers to actually run their workflows using those tools and apply those in various ways. So you can have a designer, a developer, a product person, an executive, a director, all of those people, even an architect, right? They're all using similar tools. I mean, they're all using the same system, but that system aggregates various tools depending on their workflow. So um, like for example, Figma, right, for a designer, um, or like even like Photoshop or whatever, right? I use Designer, Affinity Designer to design. I don't use Figma. Although I know Figma, I've used Figma. The advantage of Figma is you have that canvas that people can look at the same time, and you know, designers can collaborate on. And then you also have like the API and MCP servers and agents now. Figma has agents that can actually, you know, help you out with those things. So like you're essentially creating tools that integrate with those tools that a designer can use more simply to like direct work, um, and you know, and they can always dive into those tools themselves and like look at stuff and do it themselves, or like work in parallel. But essentially, you're kind of like abstracting that away from on like a higher level. So you're using the system of tools to um, you know, like get a result of your idea, like a visual result that you can like kind of share with the developer based on whatever the product person has come up with within their own workflows, um, and shared with both the developer and the designer. And then you have like the exec control layer, which is like taking the output of all three, like the foundational docs from, you know, the product team, the, you know, the mock-ups and designs and stuff from design team, and then all the build and specs models, etc., blueprints from the developer team, and kind of like compiling all that and managing all that um, into something that they can, like analyze and direct or control. So like they can split test it, all of that. And I'll get into that later, because all of these, I have defined all of these workflows into work streams, as they said. So like, I guess I can show you the general idea of it. So let's see. And this is public. You can look at it if you want. But I'm basically been working on this for about a month, seems like. And I did take it like a 2-week break, almost a 3-week break for the July 4th weekend. So I can just like stop thinking about all this shit. But anyway, coming back from that was nice. So here's like, and this, keep in mind, this is like a workspace within this system that this is trying to explain. So I'm almost like bootstrapping this idea in a way, and this is like a POC that I have implemented and still implementing a lot of stuff in it. And then this runtime control has been taking up a lot of my time recently, because this is like the Rust layer package that I have that kind of like controls the entire runtime of all of these different packages and tools that I'm explaining. But essentially, it came up with it originated from like a kind of like a high level idea of what I'm discussing. Like my initial problem was like, or my main problem as like a founder or a developer is that like I have too many ideas that I want to test. Like I have, and this kind of like it developed from like my initial idea of like having a e-commerce platform that I can test different brands in. So like it was like a multi-tenant, multi-brand solution that I wanted to like contain within like a single source code, but also like decentralize the actual deployments of all these brands as separate into like separate containers on like one or multiple servers. Right now I just have it on one server, but eventually it'll scale up to like a many servers depending on traffic, right? And yeah, like for that you would need Docker, and like the main problem I have with Docker is that it eats up so many resources, and especially if you want to like build something like that, right? You have let's say you have like 20 brands all running like multi-services, multi-packages, like micro front ends or different systems, like a design system, a UI library, all of that, like models, data models, like database layers that use those same models, right? Like you have like a split of different databases for different brands or stores, but then you also have like profiles or portfolios or authors that publish to different stores, but then now they have to communicate with all these different databases. So like as you can see, it gets very complicated. So like the solution for that is like, oh, use Shopify, right? Or like, hey, and then there's this new one. It's called context management systems, right? That they built out in Brazil. I think it's Deco or something. I was really surprised when I saw that one, because I was like, hey, I'm kind of working on a similar idea, but then I had to like, but is it really, right? Like, because that would kind of like what box you into like one language chain, but then like to me it's like, hey, I have all these libraries and tools and systems that I have developed over the years that I want to use. I don't want to like start learning another new JavaScript framework or another new build out new components using another new JavaScript. I think it's Preacted they use. So see, as you can see, that's a big problem, right? So like, how do you solve that? Then I was thinking about like, hey, what about a design system where like, the styles and the UI are completely abstracted and framework agnostic? And I had like several ideas that I've been trying out to experiment with that. How would I do that? Initially, I was like, hey, the simplest way is have a UI workspace that has different packages, and they're all feeding from the same source for styles. So like they're using the same classes and functions and utilities to like do the same things, because they're all TypeScript at the end of the day, but they're all running these different frameworks. Like you would have like React, Solid, you would have like Angular, whatever, right? Or you can have like web components, right? I'll like want to choose web components, and then you can like compile down to, or compile up to, like React and Angular, all these. But then like there's like a lot of problems with those tools. So in a way, like, what's the easier solution for that? Just style sheets, right? Like regular style sheets, Tailwind on the Tailwind, just to make things easier, right? So like Tailwind is the design system framework, and then you build on top of that, and you build like reusable components and utilities and all that, right? So like Tailwind 4, great. Like I experiment a lot with that, learned a lot too. So I landed on like more recently when I was working on Luna, which is like the previous stream that I had. I had I was looking at the wrong camera the whole time. So anyway, see like whatever. The most important part is like what I'm saying, not really the I guess not, if you think about branding, but let me not digress. So anyway, like my solution to that was, pure CSS, pure HTML, as pure as I can get it, because like these modern browser features and tools are getting so advanced that like you don't need JavaScript for a lot of these UI features anymore, right? So, man, my tea's cold. Anyway, so what you're doing now is you're building, like lower level stuff like CSS. So like you can just translate that down to the browser and use something like Lightning CSS or Tailwind to, make it work with older browsers if you wanted to. Like you can support like a series of browsers, based on based on your needs. And then like these solutions, this design system solution, this UI solution will of course have, like all the bells and whistles that you need for like a modern UI UX experience plus more. I was experimenting with a lot more new features, specifically things like scaling text depending on your screen size, and also like not containing by media query, but using actual the new container. I think they're called directive in CSS. I'm not sure, or function. I think it's a directive. Anyway, it's slipping my mind now because it's been a while since I looked at CSS. But yeah, so like I figured that part out, right? Like, hey, that's what I'm gonna do, at least for web, right? And then you can always compile the web, the CSS and HTML down to like something that works natively on an app through like various like layers or tools on like a lower level, which led me to like, hey, all these Unix and system tools that I use daily to like speed up my own workflows. What if I expand on those and learn more about those and apply them to what it is I'm doing or trying to solve? So that's kind of where it led me to this. So like I got a whole list of I created like a tool catalog of things that I actually needed to build low-level system tools that work with agents and help me speed up and automate a lot of my workflows, and also cut down on token costs, more importantly, because that was probably like one of my biggest issues. Is like I was burning through tokens because I had way too many skills that I have installed locally. They gave me some good results, sometimes they didn't, and then I had a lot of like references or resources that I would pull from that also ate a lot of my token costs. So like my input token costs were a lot. So I narrowed those down by a lot, and I have some metrics that I did, I think, save, but I'm gonna like use some benchmarks to kind of like prove that later once I have a working version of the system I'm building. So like here's where I landed, right? I try to simplify it as much as possible, and I landed on first like the native tool chain, the metadata plane, would be like number one, right? So like the native tool chain would be like, you know, your local tools and a local language that can work with them or help you work with them, um, like in a systematic way. Um, and to make this work, I relied heavily on things that already exist. Um, and, you know, I've already been experimenting with Rust through mono repos and, you know, build tools and processes like things like Vite and Turbo. Already using Rust in the background. I switched a lot of my like linting and testing tools to like Rust based tools like first it was um, Ultrasite and Biome. Then it was like Oxlint in Ox format. All of those, right? And this is specifically for TypeScript. But then there's like more tools for different languages, language chains like Python. I've been using Python a lot for, you know, like a lot of these AI libraries and tools are built with Python, specifically Pydantic. I don't know if I'm saying that right. It's like Pydantic AI is like one thing that I landed on is that I really like because it's kind of like reinforcing this idea as well, where like you're creating like a higher level tool to. I think the term was like, um, are you going to use a drill or are you going to use like a nail gun or something, right? So like if you go too low level, you're basically like nailing down your foundation one nail at a time. But then you don't have to. You can use like components to do that to make that a lot easier. So that's kind of like the idea behind all this. So you're like abstracting away all of that on a higher level, which has happened throughout software history. If you think about it, like JavaScript is all of these languages basically are abstractions, higher level abstractions that compile down to like lower level languages like C and WebAssembly, right? Specifically assembly. So that's how I landed on this package as well, which is like a Wasm, which uses Wasm, Wasatime, which is like some newer tools that kind of like, in a way, um, make low language runtimes possible in the browser through this layer. So they're creating a runtime for WebAssembly. So I thought, okay, this solves my Docker problem, right? So like now you don't really need Docker for local dev. You can just, you know, you can abstract all of your runtimes into like a package. So you can theoretically run all of these different tool chains and packages and frameworks, whatever, right? Like let's say you have like a Python app and several Python packages that rely on it, or that app relies on, right? Like an API, and then you have that API talking to like a TypeScript app that runs whatever, right? Like, um, why does that matter, right? For like, why does a developer have to like all of a sudden like to work in your system or on your project? Why do they need to now all of a sudden download all those tools and know how to run them? And like, there's like a steep learning curve and onboarding process to get everything right. And if they're not familiar, now they're struggling with, hey, how do we run the server? Like, what the fuck is going on? Like, why is this server down? Or like, why is this process not working? So like, what I'm trying to say is like, everyone has their own process, everyone has their own workflow, everyone has their own tools, but on a low level, if you go low level enough, none of that matters, right? Because at the end of the day, it's supposed to run on your hardware, on your OS. So like essentially, that's where I came up with the idea of workflows operating system. So it's like a layer that's built on top of your OS, and it's using tools that make that easy across the board. So you can run it on Linux, you can run it on Mac, you can run it on Windows or whatever, as long as you know, as long as it's possible and makes sense. But then you get to the low level problems of like, hey, man, this chip requires this, so like some tools won't work on this chip, like the Apple's chip doesn't work with every single tool. You have to have like patches or fixes or different different utilities that kind of like make it work. So like older tools won't run on like new operating systems or new chip models, stuff like that. So that's kind of like not getting into that right now because the problem that I'm trying to solve is a little bit higher level than that. So like once I run into those problems, I'll tackle them. But right now, my solution is native tool chain for like all your native tools to like make your workflow process um, to basically take control of your workflow process and connect it to the system through this tool chain. So like a backend engineer or like a front end engineer wouldn't have the same tools, but maybe they'll have the same environment, the same laptops or whatever, right? Same access to servers, and they might be running the same virtual environments, right? But they would be working in different parts of the code in the workspaces that they're assigned to, especially if the project is big enough, right? So designers are the same, like they have their own set of tools locally that they use, like Figma or Photoshop or whatever, right? And then you have like all these documents that they share, right? To kind of like alignment is a big issue. So then you have like product teams that have their own tools, like I don't know what they use, like like Jira or whatever, which is kind of like an alignment tool or like a tracking tool. But then there's also like newer tools out there now, like to help like people align company goals or product goals. But what I'm getting at is like, yes, they have their own tools, they have their own native tools, but how do you manage that, right? As part of like a wider scope. So like onboarding and alignment and scaling is a lot easier, and communication doesn't like cause drift or conflicts or confusion. And that's where the idea came into like you need a native tool chain that kind of like is you're able to control it on like a higher level, and then like helps with workers interact with it. And when I mean workers, I mean like all these people, right? Even agents too. So that's the idea. And then you have the metadata plane to kind of like express that in a higher level, on a higher level. So you're connecting the low level to the high level now, or not necessarily. You're kind of like explaining the business logic. So you're connecting the high end information that's coming from like product and exec teams from like from the top, and you connect it to the very bottom of like like agents and developers and designers. So like they're kind of like integrating through like different dimensions in a way, and you're establishing a common language that they all can use to understand what the fuck is going on, right? And like so now like you don't really have to know what a stack is. Like a product person doesn't really have to know what stack they're, because like the biggest problem with high level and low level people is like high level people get too attached to a stack because they think, hey, we can reuse all this, but theoretically you really can't. Like you can't really reuse the same thing. You can, but there's limits to it, right? So like for example, like if you want to build a new product idea out of the same project that you already have proven, and you want to pull those features in, technically looking at it from a higher level, yes, you can like, oh, like let's pull this component, like, oh, this process here or this flow here is great, let's move it there. But like the way you built it in the back end, or like that the product person doesn't see, may not necessarily make that easy, right? So what I'm saying is this metadata plane kind of like creates a new language where at the end of the day, the product person or the exec person that kind of like sells the idea to the client or communicates the idea to like the market, right, to the brand, they really shouldn't give a fuck what stack or what tech or whatever you're using. Like unless it's like a solid hard requirement for some reason, like right, like, oh, you have to use Azure because we're partnering with Microsoft or whatever, right? But let's discount that for now, right? But let's say like something like React or Angular, usually like an open source thing, right? It shouldn't matter to the product person or the designer that you're using Angular or React, um, as long as it looks the same, right? So that's what I'm saying. Like this metadata plane connects with the native tool chain. So like the developer themselves can choose what they want to build this with, and they can choose like the best tools for the right job, depending on the moment and the depending on what it is they decided to do through this shared language, through this shared understanding, through this alignment, through this foundational idea that everyone has been included in, right? Another problem with high level and low level is like there is not a lot of um, there's not enough information, right? There's a loss of there's a loss of information when you're trying to translate ideas down to um, down to the designers, and then from the designers who understood it their own way, and they had their own meetings and their own like little like side meetings that the developer wasn't really a part of because they're working on the next feature. And then like as those ideas trickle down, it becomes a real problem when all of a sudden you have to pivot or update some kind of idea, and then all of a sudden you're like creating these bottlenecks because in a way you built it this way, and this new idea that came down from the top or from the side or whatever, um, it's not gonna like fit into the code that you wrote, right? Because you had no foresight. Like most people that work, like most developers that are going to work on an idea, they're just going to work on the ticket. They're not going to care or think about the big project because they're expecting people from other departments or teams to like, or workflows, or like skill sets to like figure that out. That's because that's their job, right? They're talking to the client, the designer is translating that visually, and then the developer is like translating that into like abstract models and code or whatever, right? And then like the idea of an architect kind of like came up briefly. Hey, like how do we architect all this, right? Essentially, controlling all of this together, and then like kind of like creating like verticals and horizontals, kind of like multi-dimensional alignment in a way where you're trying to minimize that loss of information or reduce those bottlenecks. And that's a good idea if you have somebody dedicated enough to do it, like, or they understand all of those workflows and can like you know bring the teams together. But if you ever heard the concept of like you're herding cats, that doesn't really apply to developers either. It applies across the board, I think, because a lot of people have their own like you can't like people have their own ideas about stuff and how things should be done. So like at the end, like what turns out to be is that like there's too much load on developers or low level people in general, where like designers and developers specifically are kind of like overloaded and stressed out, and that kind of like translates into their work where they stop caring or they don't try as hard enough because for various reasons they don't think um, their ideas are being translated through to like the higher levels, at least from experience, right? Because for me, like the biggest issue was like changes, right? And then like scope creep that comes out of those changes. So like I understand that the client is excited and passionate about their idea, and they want to try new things, and maybe they saw a competitor do something else, so they want to like do this, do that, and then like um, at some point you have to lock your work and finish what you're working on before you can work on those. So like it creates like a backlog traditionally, right? So like there's various solutions to fix that. You like throw more money at the problem, you get more developers to like split up the work, but now you're kind of like connecting all these pieces of like different minds and different ideas how to express that together. And that doesn't just apply to humans, that also applies to agents, because whoever operates the agents will have different results. It's not always the same output because it's not um, different environments have different skills, like different people use different skills or have different workflows, they have different ideas, they have different, writing styles, which is good, but you're also like trying to align that or keep that together with like various in various ways through like documents, through blueprints, through specs, through models, right? And different skills or like shared skills, like hey, like everybody use this skill or everybody should use this framework or this tool. um, but that boxes you in, right? That still also creates bottlenecks because those things have to be maintained, those things have to be written, those things have to be reviewed, those things have to be understood. Everyone still needs to align, and now you're creating like more code with agents, but you also have to review it, you also have to prove it, you also have to maintain it, you have to read a lot of the stuff, you have to make sure you're not introducing security risks or bugs or anything. You also have to think about things that edge cases that have may not have been covered by these specs originally, so you have to go back and correct them, you know so how do you solve that realistically? For me personally, I think it's giving more freedom and giving more freedom to designers and developers and planners to use the tools and workflows that they think or know will help them produce better results. Um, and that may not always be realistic, but at least I think this can kind of help at least align people together, and you're not like stepping on too many toes, or you're not disrupting too many people's workflows. Um, so that's where the idea came from, the metadata plane connected to the native tool chain. The metadata plane specifically is like a shared language that is expressed through patterns and configurations. And I mean, I can show you that in a bit, but I want to kind of cover these last three here that I landed on, which is like, I call them products, but they're really like packages. Um, again, the docs are a work in progress. And I will say that these docs that you're seeing here in this public repo have been basically created out of plans and foundational docs locally. So like, and I'll talk about that later because that's a separate workflow or work stream that I have kind of like divided. And I'll show you the architecture diagrams later about what I mean by that. But essentially, what I tried to do is like I try to split up planning, which is like I would say like the lowest level of work, no matter what you're doing, because before you start doing something or before you run your workflow on a specific task, at the end of the day, you're thinking about it and you're putting it down on paper, or you're expressing it into words, into like a logical expression through English usually. And you may have like a format for that. Some people call it PRDs, like product requirement docs, technical requirement docs, and there's architecture requirement docs, right? Design requirement docs, all of that, right? So like those would be foundational documents. But it's a little bit beyond that, right? Because you're not just talking about products here, you're talking about a system. So like on a lower level, you need like a way to express what you're thinking into text, right? Into like a formatted text that you can develop. And what I thought was like, hey, you don't just need a note taking app like yes, Obsidian is great, right? That's I use that a lot, but like I also used markdown files, right? Just to start, just because I want to like create some patterns. But Obsidian is great for like creating relationships between files, but like that can easily get complex. So you still need some kind of way to organize these files, right? You need like naming conventions, and you need to split them up. You essentially need like wikis, right, for your ideas in a sense. as they're being developed, but you also need to version control them and record how the idea started and how those ideas expanded. So like I came up with like a product or a tool called Mindflow because as I was iterating with the agent, right, through my day to day, as I'm talking to Chat GPT, right, for example, I'm saying, hey, like I got this idea, like blah blah blah. I have my pattern that I have, or template that I have for trying to, you know, get a good output from the agent. So like normally he'll respond with a document after doing some research based on what I said and asked, right? But I also like as I'm reading that response, I have thoughts and comments that I want to write, right? So like you're creating threads now off of that response. So in a way, you're creating like a multi-thread document that kind of like leads or captures that entire idea, and then from that you can extract all of these foundational documents that you can develop and publish and actually share with other workers that have their own workflows and works and belong in different work streams. So like within a work stream, like let's say you have a planned work stream, right? Within that work stream, you may have different sets of workflows. Like you're planning on a product level, you're planning on a marketing level, you're planning on a branding level, you're planning on a design level, you're planning on a development level, right? So there's like different levels and layers to this. So like in a sense, you're kind of like trying to capture those patterns within these workflows and trying to automate a lot of them, and you're also trying to share information between them within that work stream, but also outside of that work stream, you have to share whatever it is collectively was decided to be shared with a separate work stream. So like, yes, you may have like a technical person in like a product workflow, right? So like inside your planning work stream, you have, let's say, a product related workflows, and within that product related workflow, you would have. I gotta stop looking at that camera. Let me just turn it off. So like